The rain in New York came down like a wall of silver knives, slashing across the empty streets and turning the gutters into rushing rivers. In the half-light of a stormy dawn, a weary father clutched his young son's hand and hurried through the flooded sidewalks, their shoes splashing through icy water. James Carter bent low against the wind, his old jacket already soaked through, every step a battle against the relentless storm. Beside him, 8-year-old Michael tried to keep pace, his small fingers gripping his father's with desperate trust. They were late, again, and James knew the diner manager would have no patience left. But the boy's safety mattered more than any job. Lightning split the sky above the darkened city, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that rattled windows and echoed down the deserted avenue. Michael flinched, eyes wide. "Daddy, I'm scared of the thunder," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of rain. "Are we going to be late?" James crouched briefly, despite the cold water soaking his knees, bringing his face level with his son's. "Remember what I told you, buddy. Thunder's just the sky clapping its big hands, loud, but it can't hurt us." "But it sounds so close," Michael said, his small body trembling. "I know. It feels scary. Hold my hand tight and we'll count together after each flash." "Okay, that way we'll know how far away it is." Michael nodded, and they started counting, their voices lost beneath the relentless downpour. James risked a glance at a glowing clock inside a darkened storefront. 7:45 a.m. The neon numbers blurred behind streaks of rain. Only 15 minutes remained to cross the city to the diner, where he scrubbed dishes for minimum wage. In weather like this, with flooded streets, black skies, and wind that tore at their battered umbrella, they were already cutting it dangerously close. "We'll make it," James said, with a steadiness he didn't feel. "We always do." He squeezed Michael's hand and pushed forward through the storm. The streets were nearly empty, New Yorkers having wisely sought refuge from the brutal weather. Street lamps flickered, their glow swallowed by the rain. Wind screamed between the buildings, tugging violently at their umbrella, until it finally flipped inside out with a metallic snap. James cursed under his breath and shoved the useless thing into his bag. Puddles stretched into lakes, reflecting a fractured world of grey and amber light. As they neared the subway entrance, something caught James's eye. A car, sleek and black, sitting at an awkward angle against the curb. Hazard lights blinked weakly in the gloom. A woman stood beside it, her hair plastered to her face, a cell phone pressed to her ear. Even through the downpour, James could hear the sharp edge of panic in her voice. "I've been waiting over an hour," she cried into the phone. "You said 30 minutes. No, I can't wait another 2 or 3 hours. My mother, she's had another stroke. The doctor said if I want to..." Her voice cracked into sobs. "Please, isn't there anyone closer?" She ended the call with a trembling hand, shoulders slumping under the weight of despair. Another call, another rejection. The storm had shut down the city, and no taxi or rideshare would risk these flooded streets. James slowed, torn between obligation and conscience. He could feel the seconds slipping away. His boss, Mr. DeMarco, had been crystal clear. One more late arrival meant termination. No excuses, no second chances. The job was their lifeline, the only thing keeping them from the streets. But he couldn't ignore the sight before him. The woman's panic was unmistakable. Her eyes raw with fear, she fumbled through her contacts, rainwater dripping from her hands, as she tried another number that would only fail her. James stopped. His heartbeat thundered louder than the storm. He crouched to meet Michael's eyes. "Buddy," he said, his voice low but urgent. "That lady needs help. Her car's broken and her mom is really sick at the hospital." Michael looked at the woman, then back at his father, his young face filled with a wisdom beyond his years. "We should help her, Daddy." You always say helping people is the most important thing. Pride and worry twisted together in James's chest. He nodded once. You're right. Stay here under this awning with our things. I'll be back as soon as I can. Rain sheeted across the street as he approached the stranded woman. She spun toward him, fear flashing in her eyes at the sight of a stranger emerging from the storm. But desperation overrode suspicion. My tire, it's flat, she blurted, her words tumbling out in a rush. I called roadside assistance 3 times. First they said 30 minutes, then an hour. Now they're saying 2 to 3 hours because of the weather. No taxis, no Ubers. Nobody will come here in this storm. My mother's had a massive stroke. They said if I want to say goodbye. Her voice broke completely. James's decision was immediate, instinctive. Do you have a spare? Yes, in the trunk. Tools too. But I don't know how to change it and everyone keeps saying they can't help tonight. I can fix it, James said firmly. Take this umbrella to my son. He's waiting over there. Stay with him. Keep warm. I'll handle the tire. But you'll get soaked, she protested, shivering. You'll freeze. Your mother needs you more than I need to stay dry. Time matters now. Go! Tears welled in her eyes, gratitude mingling with fear. She grabbed the umbrella and hurried to where Michael waited, crouching beside him to shield them both, while James went to work. The trunk opened with a metallic groan. Inside lay the spare tire, jack, and lug wrench. Rainwater streamed over the tools as James knelt in the flooded street, his jacket quickly plastered to his thin frame. The cold bit into his bones, but he forced numb fingers to action. One lug nut, then another. Each was slick and stubborn, refusing to yield to the wrench. Wind howled down the street, driving sheets of rain into his face. His hands slipped again and again, skin scraping against wet metal. Still he worked, jaw clenched, thinking only of a dying woman waiting for her daughter's hand. Under the awning, Michael's small voice carried faintly through the storm. My daddy's really good at fixing things, he told the woman with quiet pride. He says helping people is what makes us good, not money or big houses. 15 minutes passed, then 20. James's muscles burned from the effort, his body trembling violently as the cold sank deeper. At last, with one final twist of the wrench, the last lug nut locked into place. He rose unsteadily, soaked to the skin and shivering uncontrollably. All done, he called, his teeth chattering so hard the words barely formed. You can make it to the hospital now. The woman ran to him, eyes wide with relief. She tried to press a wad of cash into his frozen hands. Please take this. You're freezing. You need to get warm. James shook his head, pushing the money back despite his trembling. No, just go. Your mother needs you. The woman's eyes shimmered with urgency as she tried to press the folded bills into his freezing hands. Please, you're soaked. Take this. Buy a coat. Get warm. You need this more than I do. James shook his head violently, another shiver ripping through his body like a bolt of ice. Your mother is waiting, he said, voice raw and cracking. That's all that matters. Go, be with her. That's the only payment I'll ever need. The stranger, her hair plastered to her face by the relentless rain, hesitated, torn between gratitude and panic. Tears streaked down her cheeks, mingling with the downpour. My name is Catherine Hastings, she whispered urgently. Please, I need to find you again. Give me your name, a number, anything. I need to repay you. James Carter. He managed through chattering teeth. But a phone number. He didn't have one. There was no home to call. Where can I reach you? Where do you live? James faltered, shame tightening his chest. We move around, he admitted softly. It's okay. Just go to her. Catherine pulled a sleek business card from her purse, the white surface already spattered with rain. Then at least write down a shelter, anywhere, somewhere I can leave a message. With numb fingers, James scrawled the address of St. Mary's. the church shelter, where he and Michael sometimes found a bed when space allowed. Catherine clutched the card like a lifeline. "I'll find you, I promise. Thank you, James Carter. Because of you, I might have a chance to say goodbye." Without another word, she sprinted back to her car and disappeared into the storm, taillights glowing like twin embers in the grey night. James stood alone on the curb, the rain pounding his thin jacket until water streamed from his sleeves. His body quaked uncontrollably. Michael hurried over, clutching the battered umbrella, his small face twisted in alarm. "Daddy! You're shaking! Your lips are blue." "I'm fine, buddy," James said, though his voice was barely audible. "We've got to hurry now. We can still make work." But deep down, he knew the truth. They were already late. Far too late. They slogged through ankle-deep water toward the diner. The storm, a merciless wall of wind and cold. By the time they stumbled through the kitchen entrance, they were 45 minutes past the start of his shift. Mr. DeMarco, the owner, stood waiting, fury radiating from every line of his red face. "Carter," he barked, "this is the last straw. You're late again. Always an excuse." "Please, Mr. DeMarco," James rasped, chest tightening with each breath. "There was an emergency. A woman's mother was dying. I had to help her. I don't care about your sob stories." DeMarco cut him off, voice like a whip. "You're dripping all over my clean floor. Out! You're finished. Take the kid and get out of my restaurant." The door slammed behind them, sealing their fate. Back in the bitter rain, James felt something wrong deep inside. His head throbbed, his chest burned with every breath, and the violent shivers wouldn't stop. By the time they reached St. Mary's, his fever blazed so fiercely that he barely remained conscious. Sister Margaret took one look at him and gasped, "Sweet Lord, he's burning up. Hypothermia and fever. Get him to the clinic, now." For the next 7 days, James drifted in and out of awareness, his body waging war against pneumonia and exhaustion. Michael remained at his side, as much as the nurses would allow, clutching his father's hand with quiet, terrified devotion. On the 8th morning, James opened his eyes to find Michael's tear-streaked face hovering above him. "Daddy!" the boy sobbed, relief breaking through like sunlight. "You came back. I was so scared." James gathered what little strength he had and pulled his son close. "I'll always come back to you, buddy. Always." Dr. Patel explained gently that James had narrowly survived severe pneumonia, hypothermia, extreme fatigue. Your body shut down to save itself. You'll need rest, antibiotics, and good meals for at least a week. But rest was a luxury they couldn't afford. The shelter's 3-day limit meant they'd soon be back on the streets with no job, no money, and nowhere to go. Days passed in a blur of slow recovery. Michael stayed brave, but James could see the boy's clothes hanging looser, his small frame thinner. They were sitting in the shelter's common room when Sister Margaret entered with a familiar figure beside her. "James," the nun said warmly, "this lady has been searching everywhere for you." James looked up, stunned. Catherine Hastings stood there, no longer in business attire, but in simple jeans and a coat, her eyes carrying both sorrow and determination. "Mr. Carter," she said softly. "May I sit?" James nodded, still weak and embarrassed. "Because of you," Catherine began, her voice trembling. "I reached the hospital in time. My mother. She held on just long enough for me to tell her I loved her and to say goodbye. You gave me that gift, the most precious goodbye a daughter could ask for." Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. "I tried to find you the next day, but the shelter said you weren't here. Then I learned you were in the clinic, sick because you helped me." Her voice tightened with grief. "I am so sorry." James shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. That's exactly why I'm here," Catherine said, her eyes bright with resolve. She pulled a thick envelope from her bag. "Sister Margaret told me everything. how you lost your job, how you nearly died. I need to do more than say thank you. James opened his mouth to protest, but Catherine pressed on. I'm the CEO of Sterling Motors, she explained. We manufacture luxury vehicles. I watched you work that night. How fast, how precise, how fearless you were in the worst possible conditions. But more than skill, you showed character, integrity, courage. That's what my company needs. She slid a business card across the table. I'd like to offer you a job. Head of Maintenance Operations. 30-day trial to start. Full benefits if it works out. The position begins Monday. We'll provide an advance. First month's rent, proper clothing. Anything you and Michael need to start fresh. James stared, convinced he was hallucinating. I'm a dishwasher. I don't have qualifications for something like that. You fixed a tire in a thunderstorm in 15 minutes. Catherine replied firmly. And you risked everything to help a stranger. Those are the qualifications that matter to me. Her eyes softened. My mother's last words to me were, find the helpers. They're the ones who truly matter. You're a helper, James. Now please, let me help you. She stood, pausing at the door. Monday morning, don't be late. When she left, silence filled the room like a held breath. James looked down at the card, trembling in his hands. Michael climbed carefully onto his lap. Daddy, is the nice lady going to help us? James hugged his son tightly, tears spilling freely for the first time in years. I think so, buddy. I think maybe everything is finally going to be okay. For the first time in as long as he could remember, James allowed himself to hope. 3 days. 3 days to recover, to believe, to prepare for a future he'd never dared to imagine. The weekend passed in a haze of cautious excitement, and true to her word, Catherine made sure every promise was kept. Saturday morning arrived with a knock at the shelter door. A uniformed courier stood waiting, raincoat still damp from the drizzle outside. For James Carter, he said, handing Sister Margaret a thick envelope, before disappearing back into the grey morning. Inside was a crisp note and a stack of cash, more money than James had seen in years. For rent, clothing, and anything you and Michael need. See you Monday. Catherine H. James stared at the contents, stunned by the sight of 20 carefully banded $100 bills. His hands trembled as he counted $2,000. With Sister Margaret's guidance, the miracle took shape before the day was done. By evening, she had helped James sign a short-term lease on a tiny efficiency in Queens. It was hardly more than a single room, with a narrow kitchenette and a small bathroom. But the heater worked, the door had a solid lock, and a single square window let in a slice of winter light. We have a home, Daddy, Michael shouted, spinning in a delighted circle on the scuffed floorboards. A real home. James sank onto the second-hand couch that had come with the place, still weak but smiling for the first time in weeks. Yes, buddy, he said quietly, emotion thick in his voice. A real home. Sunday evening brought a nervous kind of excitement. James carefully laid out the brand new clothes they'd bought that afternoon. Sturdy work pants, a pale blue shirt, and a pair of clean boots. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed the fabric. Daddy, you look handsome, Michael said shyly, watching him adjust the shirt in the cracked mirror. James smiled and knelt to meet his son's gaze. Thanks, champ. Tomorrow's a big day for both of us. You'll be starting at your new school, a real school. Are you nervous? Michael bit his lip and nodded. A little, but you're nervous too, right? James chuckled softly. Yeah, I am, but we'll be brave together. Deal? Deal, Michael said, their small handshakes sealing the promise. Monday morning, long before sunrise, James woke with his heart hammering. Sleep had been impossible. He made breakfast, real breakfast, with eggs sizzling in a pan and slices of toast browning in the toaster. The warm smell filled their tiny apartment. a luxury they hadn't enjoyed in months after walking Michael to his first day at the local elementary school, where Catherine had already arranged enrollment and meal assistance. James boarded the subway for Long Island City. The Sterling Motors headquarters loomed against the morning sky, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, reflecting the first rays of sunlight. His palms were damp as he approached the security desk. "James Carter," he said, voice tight with nerves. "I have an appointment with Ms. Hastings." The guard smiled as though he'd been expecting him all along. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter. Ms. Hastings said to send you right up. Executive floor, 28th. Here's your temporary badge." The elevator whisked him skyward. His reflection in the mirrored walls, a mix of excitement and disbelief. When the doors opened, a poised assistant was waiting. "Mr. Carter, I'm Patricia, Ms. Hastings' assistant. She's ready for you." Catherine's office was a cathedral of light, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the silver ribbon of the East River. She rose from behind her sleek desk, her smile warm and genuine. "James, you look much better. How are you feeling?" "Better," he said with a modest cough. "Still a bit of a cold, but much better." "Thank you." "Good. I'm glad. Please, have a seat." Her tone shifted slightly as she settled opposite him. "I want to be completely transparent about what this position involves." James leaned forward, heart racing. "The role is head of maintenance operations," Catherine explained. "You'll oversee all vehicle maintenance programs, coordinate facility upkeep, and manage a team of 15 technicians. 15. The number hit him like a sudden gust of wind. "I've never managed anyone before." "Call me Catherine, please," she said kindly. "And yes, I know this is a leap. That's why we're starting with a 30-day trial. My current operations manager, David Reynolds, will mentor you. You'll have guidance every step of the way. What I need is someone who understands the work from the ground up, and someone I can trust." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed terms and a salary that made his breath catch. If the trial goes well, the position pays $65,000 a year. During the trial period, it's $48,000 annualized. Health coverage for you and Michael begins immediately. James stared at the numbers, barely able to comprehend them. $65,000. "You're wondering why you," Catherine said softly. "Because credentials don't teach character. That night in the storm, you had every reason to keep walking. Instead, you helped a stranger. That's leadership, James. That's exactly what I need on my team." She extended her hand, her eyes steady. "So, do you accept?" James stood, feeling both terrified and alive. "Yes, I accept, and I promise you won't regret it." "I already know I won't," Catherine said with a bright smile. "Now, let's meet your team." The maintenance floor was a cavernous space, alive with the clatter of tools and the hum of machinery. 15 men and women looked up as Catherine led James inside. Some offered polite nods, others exchanged wary glances. An older man with sharp blue eyes stepped forward. "This is David Reynolds," Catherine announced. "He'll help James transition over the next month." David's handshake was firm but cool, his skepticism obvious. "Welcome," he said, his tone making the words sound like a challenge. After Catherine departed, David pulled James aside. "Look, I don't know what you did to impress the boss, but this is a serious operation. Do you even have AC certification? Any formal training?" "No, sir," James admitted evenly. "But I'm here to learn and to work hard." David snorted. "We'll see. HR first. Background check. Fingerprints. Safety orientation. That'll eat up most of your day." The hours that followed were a blur of paperwork and training videos. Lisa from Human Resources guided him through tax forms, direct deposit setups, emergency contacts, and safety acknowledgements. Background checks usually take 5 to 7 days. Lisa explained. "Until then, you'll be on provisional status. By late afternoon, James finally saw his office. A modest room, just big enough for a desk, a computer, and towering stacks of maintenance manuals. "Those are the training binders," David said, gesturing toward the mountain of paperwork. "Vehicle specs, protocols, safety regulations. You'll need to know all of it. Team meeting tomorrow at 2. Don't be late." When David left, James stared at the mountain of material. It felt impossible, but then he pictured Michael sitting in his new classroom, their apartment warm and safe, and Catherine's unwavering faith in him. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. A young woman with a friendly smile leaned in. "Mr. Carter, I'm Sophia Martinez, parts inventory. I heard what you did for Ms. Hastings that night. That took real courage. Thank you, Sophia. And please, call me James." "Okay, James." Her smile widened. "Some of the guys might be set in their ways, but not all of us. If you need help, computer stuff, procedures, anything, just ask. I appreciate that," he said sincerely. When she left, James exhaled and opened the first manual. If he had hours until tomorrow's meeting, he would use every minute. The next afternoon, he stepped into the conference room, where 15 pairs of eyes studied him with a mix of curiosity and doubt. "Good afternoon," James began, keeping his voice steady. "I know I'm not what you expected. I don't have the usual certifications or degrees, but I care about quality work, and I'm here to learn from every one of you." He locked eyes with David's cool stare. "I'm not here to change everything overnight. I'm here to understand how you work, what you need, and how we can make this operation stronger, together. Over the next 30 days, I'll be learning from you." A broad-shouldered mechanic named Tony leaned back in his chair. "With all due respect, how can you manage maintenance if you don't know our systems?" "That's fair, Tony," James replied calmly. "I know engines and I know vehicles. What I don't know yet is your specific procedures. That's where you come in. Teach me what works and what doesn't." The room grew quiet. Questions followed. Technical details, schedules, frustrations about outdated equipment. James listened more than he spoke, taking careful notes, asking thoughtful questions. By the end of the hour, the tension had softened ever so slightly. A few team members even offered small nods of approval. It wasn't victory, but it was a beginning. After the meeting broke up, David motioned for James to stay behind. "You handled yourself better than I expected," he admitted, his tone cool but no longer openly hostile. "But talk is cheap. Tomorrow you're on the floor. Let's see if you can back it up with real work." James met his eyes without flinching. "I look forward to it," he said simply. That evening, James picked up Michael from the after-school program. The boy ran into his arms, backpack bouncing. "How was your first day, Daddy?" Michael asked as they walked toward the subway. "Challenging," James said with a small smile. "But good. How about you?" "I made 2 friends, Emma and Marcus," Michael said proudly. "And the teacher's really nice. We even learned fractions." On the train ride home, Michael leaned against his father's shoulder and drifted to sleep, his small head warm and heavy. James stared at his son's peaceful face, his thoughts swirling. The skepticism from the crew, the pressure of the 30-day trial, all of it loomed large. But he also thought of Sophia's kindness, the solid comfort of their little apartment, and the fact that Michael now had friends, meals, and a real school. For the first time in years, they had something that felt like stability. They had hope. James arrived at the maintenance facility the next morning at 6 sharp, a full hour before his official start. The sun hadn't yet cleared the skyline, but the cavernous garage was already alive with the smell of oil and the metallic echo of early work. Tony was crouched over a complex transmission, hands moving with confident precision. "You're early," Tony said, eyebrows rising. "Wanted to see the morning routine." James replied. Mind if I watch? Tony gave a half shrug. Suit yourself. Just don't get in the way. For the next hour, James observed carefully, asking quiet questions, offering tools when needed. Tony worked like a surgeon, each motion deliberate, each adjustment purposeful. You're really good at this, James said at last. How long have you been doing transmission work? 22 years, Tony replied, barely glancing up. Started as an apprentice at 18. It shows, James said sincerely. The way you can diagnose a problem by sound alone, that's mastery. Tony finally paused, narrowing his eyes. You actually know engines, or are you just buttering me up? James smiled faintly. I've rebuilt plenty of older models in my time. Nothing this sophisticated, but fundamentals are fundamentals. Tony smirked. Prove it. He gestured toward a sleek sedan in the corner. That one's been giving us fits for 3 days. Intermittent starting issue. We replaced the battery, alternator, ran every test in the book. Still no fix. James rolled up his sleeves and leaned over the engine bay, listening closely as Tony turned the key. He scanned the connections, running a practiced hand along the wiring. Then he saw it. A faint discoloration on a ground wire, almost invisible. Here, James said, pointing. Corrosion on the ground connection. Not enough to fail completely, but enough to cause random misfires, especially in humidity. Tony bent to look, eyes widening. I'll be damned. We missed that completely. He let out a short laugh. Maybe you do know your stuff. He wiped his hands and extended one. Tony Morelli. James Carter. James said, shaking it firmly. By the time the rest of the team arrived, word of James's discovery had already spread. The atmosphere shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. He was no longer just the mysterious new hire from the boss's charity file. He was someone who understood the work. Over the next several days, James threw himself into every aspect of the job, with Sophia's patient help on the computer systems, and David's blunt but invaluable guidance on procedures. He absorbed everything he could. He worked shoulder to shoulder with the crew, never asking anyone to do a task he wasn't willing to tackle himself. When the night shift needed emergency help on a complicated repair, James stayed until midnight, his hands black with grease. Michael never complained about the long hours. Their apartment was paradise compared to the shelter, and school was becoming a joy. The boy thrived, making friends, eating regular meals, and coming home with stories of playground games and science projects. 2 weeks into the trial, James sat at his desk, reviewing maintenance schedules when David entered. His expression tight. We've got a situation, David said. Senator Morrison, a VIP client, is expecting his car serviced before a major event tomorrow. He's considering a bulk order for the state government. Problem is, we're short-staffed. My 2 best mechanics just called in sick. We're dead in the water unless we pull an all-nighter. What needs to be done? James asked immediately. David frowned. You can't handle a full VIP service alone. It takes hours, even for a seasoned team. Then we'll do it together, James said without hesitation. David studied him for a long beat, then nodded. All right, but this is going to be a long, ugly night. The 2 men worked side by side until dawn. James handled the mechanical overhaul under David's supervision, while David managed the cosmetic details and quality checks. By morning, the car gleamed like it had just left the showroom. As they stood admiring their work, David finally broke the silence. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I thought you were just someone Catherine felt sorry for. But you're the real deal. You work harder than anyone I've ever met, and you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. That's real leadership. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove myself. James replied, fatigue lining his voice, but pride shining in his eyes. The service was a triumph. Senator Morrison was so impressed that he immediately signed an order for 20 vehicles. Catherine personally sought them out to deliver her thanks, her praise unmistakable. By the end of the 30-day trial, the transformation was undeniable. Under James's quiet but determined leadership, efficiency across the department had risen 15%. Morale was higher than anyone could remember, and the small procedural improvements he introduced were already saving the company thousands of dollars. 2 days before the trial ended, Catherine summoned James to her office. Her voice was warm but serious. "James, please sit," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "We need to talk about your trial period." James felt his stomach, not as he lowered himself into the chair. Catherine held his gaze for a long moment, before her serious expression softened into a radiant smile. "I've received glowing reports from David, from your team, even from clients," she said. "The feedback is unanimous. You've exceeded every expectation." She slid a folder across the polished desk. "This is your permanent employment contract. $65,000 a year, full benefits for you and Michael, plus performance bonuses that could add another $10,000 annually. Welcome to Sterling Motors, James." James took the contract with trembling hands, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do," Catherine replied gently. "You gave me the gift of a final goodbye with my mother. Let me give you and Michael the gift of a future. You've earned every bit of this." That evening, James treated Michael to a family restaurant dinner, the first in the boys' memory. Warm light spilled across the table as Michael bit into a burger and beamed at his father. "We're staying, buddy," James said, voice thick with emotion. Michael looked up, eyes shining. "You mean this is really home?" James smiled, feeling hope settle into his bones like a long-forgotten warmth. "Yes," he said, squeezing his son's small hand. "This is home, for good. The job is permanent," James said softly, his eyes shining as he set the signed contract down on the table. "We're really going to be okay now." Michael shot up from his seat and threw his arms around his father's neck. "I knew you could do it, Daddy," he exclaimed, his voice full of unshakable belief. They lingered in that embrace, father and son, wrapped in the warmth of a victory they had earned together. Over dinner, James's mind drifted back to the night that had started it all. The cold rain, the broken-down car, the choice to help a stranger when his own life was crumbling. That single act of decency, made with no thought of reward, had set into motion a chain of events he could never have imagined. He had lost nearly everything, yet that moment of kindness had come back to him 100-fold. For the first time in years, the road ahead felt wide and bright. There would still be obstacles, of course. Life always brought them. But now James knew, with a certainty he could feel in his bones, that he and Michael would not merely survive. They would thrive. Months later, autumn arrived with crisp mornings and leaves the color of copper pennies swirling along the sidewalks of Queens. In the soft light of early day, James stood before the bathroom mirror adjusting his tie. The man looking back at him was almost unrecognizable, healthier, steadier, carrying himself with quiet confidence. The stubborn cough that once rattled his chest was gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of a body finally cared for. Michael, too, was flourishing. He bounded through school with straight A's, a widening circle of friends, and a grin that seemed to belong permanently on his face. He had even joined the school choir, filling their apartment with songs during evening rehearsals. At Sterling Motors, James had become more than a new hire. He was now a cornerstone of the operation. David, once skeptical, had become a trusted mentor and true friend. The team sought James out for guidance on complex jobs and personal struggles alike. Tony, who had once doubted his abilities, now treated him like a brother, swapping advanced mechanical tricks for the practical wisdom James carried from years of hands-on experience. Sophia welcomed James and Michael into her family circle, their children becoming fast friends who chased each other through playgrounds and living rooms. And Catherine, his once distant employer, had become something more than a boss. She was a mentor, a confidant, a steadfast ally who checked in regularly, came to Michael's school performances, and celebrated their milestones as if they were her own. One brisk morning, as James tightened the last knot of his tie, a sudden knock echoed through the apartment. Opening the door, he found Catherine standing there, a wide smile lighting her face, and an envelope clutched in her hand. "I couldn't wait to share this," she said, eyes sparkling with excitement. "The board met yesterday. They've approved a major expansion of the maintenance division, and they want you to lead it. We're creating a brand new position, Director of Maintenance Training and Development. Starting salary, $85,000 plus bonuses." James blinked, stunned into silence. "There's more," Catherine continued, her voice softening. "We're also launching a scholarship program for employees' children. Michael's education, from elementary school all the way through college, will be fully covered." James felt a rush of emotion so strong, it nearly buckled his knees. From nights of sleeping in shelters to this, security, recognition, a future for his son. Tears gathered in his eyes. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rough with gratitude. "For believing in me, for seeing something worth trusting." Catherine's eyes glistened as well. "You had it all along, James," she said gently. "You just needed someone to give you the chance to show it." After she left, James closed the door and leaned against it, the quiet hum of the apartment surrounding him. He looked around at the tidy rooms, filled with second-hand furniture, and Michael's drawings taped proudly to the walls. This was no longer a temporary refuge. It was home. He thought of Michael asleep in the next room, safe and loved. He thought of the job waiting for him, the team that respected him, the bright future stretching forward like an open road. And he thought of that rainy night, the bitter cold, the soaked clothes, the desperate uncertainty, and of the simple choice that had changed everything. He had helped a stranger because he couldn't bear to walk away. That single decision, made in darkness and desperation, had rippled outward in ways he could never have predicted. James smiled, a deep, quiet smile that came from somewhere unshakable. The storm was behind them, sunshine awaited, and now, finally they were home,